Right, well, welcome to this Connections webinar. I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Douglas West. I'm a professor of marketing at the Business School, and I will introduce our guest speaker to you in just a moment. And also we have a student joining us who's going to act as our discussant. Our speaker today is Chris MacLeod, and he's going to ask the intriguing question, what's the purpose of purpose? And just to let you know that at the bottom of the screen, you will see a Q&A box and a chat box. The best one to use if you'd like to ask questions of our speaker is the Q&A box. On the whole, just ignore the hands up that you might be used to using because we won't be responding to that today. So we'll be using mainly the Q&A box, but you're welcome to use the chat box as well. Now let me introduce to you our speaker, Chris MacLeod. It's a great privilege to have Chris with us today. Chris is Director of Customer and Revenue at Transport for London, where he's been for 14 years. And he has three roles to his, three roles to what he does at Transport for London. First of all, he has to understand customers. He has to understand the Transport for London customers and develop the customer strategy to ensure that they're providing the most relevant services in the best and most effective way. The other thing he does is he directs all the marketing and customer activities at Transport for London, and he looks after research and insight, advertising, promotion, online, signage, wayfinding, all these various things. I've been into his office to see him occasionally, and I can tell you he has a huge array of activities that he's managing at any one time. But having done all this, the third thing he has to do is to ensure that there's a proper financial return to what they do. And so he looks after all the non-operational sources of revenue, such as advertising, sponsorship, partnerships, and licensing. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if Transport for London were listed on the FTSE 100, the top companies listed in London, Transport for London would actually be quite high up there. And I'll just say this final couple of points about Chris. Previously, he ran his own business, his own consulting. He's been a managing partner at a very well-known advertising agency called McCann Erickson. And he was also chairman at a very famous advertising agency called Collett Dickinson Pierce. Well, before Chris starts his talk, can I introduce to you also Janaki. Janaki is actually an ex-student of mine, a great student, studying on our international marketing MSc, and it's a great pleasure to have her with us. She's had many years of market research experience and is using her degree to finesse her understanding and application in the fields of marketing. She's the academic rep for her class, voicing the cohort's feedback to the teaching community and creating an environment of mutual feedback and growth. And I'd also like to say she's also an induction group lead, as she believes it's necessary to share ideas and make new students feel warm and welcome, which is really nice. And we'll be asking Janaki to moderate and look at your questions over the presentation. Well, look, that's enough from me. I'm just setting the scene for Chris MacLeod, and I'd like to open the floor to Chris for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Janaki, as well. Douglas mentioned my office. I'm clearly not in my office, or rather I'm in my home office in currently reasonably sunny North London. So it's great to have this opportunity to talk to you. And I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of purpose. It's a corporate concept, but also has big applications in marketing. I'll say a little bit more about Transport for London towards the end of the presentation. I'm just going to get straight into the main part of the content today. So the agenda, bit of an introduction, then I'm going to talk to you about PVMV. I'll explain that a little bit more. Talk about the value of purpose to businesses, and also a counter view. Not everybody thinks that the purpose, in the way that some people use it, is the right way of doing things. Is it a matter of definition? I'll talk about that. Highlight a case study. Give some examples of when purpose and the application of purpose goes wrong. As I said, I'll come back and say a little bit about TFL and how we apply purpose. Summarize quickly, and then hopefully we'll get into a discussion. I really would welcome questions on the topic, but I'll take questions on pretty much anything, ideally related to the topic or TFL or marketing more generally. I'll talk for about 25 minutes, so hopefully that'll leave us a good time to talk together. So, right, what's the purpose of purpose? Well, I'll explain the idea of purpose in a little bit more detail in a minute, but it's a concept which we're seeing a growing use of as a business driver, a concept which businesses organize themselves around. The question is it a valuable business tool, or is it just sort of marketing jargon, one of those another buzzwords that is thrown about by marketing experts and consultants? Well, there's considerable evidence of the contribution that it can make, and I'm going to take you through some of that. But it can be a divisive construct for some, as I touched on, and I'll say a little bit about that. And maybe that's something that we'll come back and discuss at the end. So, purpose. Here's what Larry Fink of BlackRock, the big investment company, thinks. Without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its full potential. It will ultimately lose the license to operate from key stakeholders. So, a pretty important concept. But what exactly is it? And I'll come back to that PVMV that I talked about at the beginning, and maybe sorting out some of the jargon around corporate positioning, corporate development. So the PVMV relates to four key concepts: purpose, vision, mission statement, and values. And you may well have heard, hopefully you have heard of all of these. So purpose, these are the definitions I'm using. Purpose, why you exist, which is not just about making profit necessarily or shareholder value, but going beyond those concepts. Companies often talk about having a vision, where they want to get to, what they want to achieve. There's a recommendation that all companies will have a mission or mission statement, and that really covers what you need to do to get to that and achieve that vision. And then finally, there are values, how you operate, something maybe called the organizational culture. And there's been quite a lot of academic work on all of these topics, and quite a lot of efforts of organizations, particularly larger corporates, goes into defining these. One observation is that it can be a little bit of sort of overlap between purpose, vision, mission, particularly between purpose and mission. My own view is that sort of doesn't absolutely matter, as long as it's always clear what you're saying, what you mean by what you're saying, and people understand the concepts you use. So say I'm not a great sort of stickler for being absolutely precise about these things, as long as they have internal integrity within the organizations and how they are applied. So that's PVMV. Some examples of purpose. Some, again, you may know some of these. Starbucks, to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Or there's Whole Foods Markets, who talks about our purpose is to nourish people and the planet. And maybe a slightly more lighthearted one, Harley Davidson, we fulfill dreams of personal freedom. So quite a range there, but you can see that these are all concepts which are a little bit beyond saying things like maximizing shareholder value or profit. I'm now going to go through and talk a little bit about the value of purpose and having a clear and purpose and communicating that purpose. So the first example is from the book Grow by Jim Stengel, which is quite an interesting book by a former CEO of Procter & Gamble. And he pulled together, he didn't do these studies, but he pulled together lots of different studies, lots of different examples, and showed that, for example, in a 10-year study of 50,000 brands, those focused on improving people's lives significantly outperformed. And of those, the 50 highest performing businesses were driven by brand ideals, this idea of having a greater purpose. They grew 3 times faster than their competitors and were 400% more profitable than if you'd invested in the S&P 500. So there's a sort of a performance advantage, if you like, to having a clear purpose. Another example of purpose is the work done by Unilever and their former chief marketing officer, Keith Weed. He reported that their best performing brands were purpose driven. In this case, their purpose was around sustainability. And he said sustainability wasn't a moral issue for Unilever, it was an economic issue. And they talked about sustainable living brands and putting sustainable living at the heart of their brands, and that those brands that they focused on with a clear purpose grew 30% faster than the rest of the business. So I think those examples are more about sort of the commercial value of having a clear purpose. The third example is really from this quote by David Jones, who was a former CEO of a major ad agency. Consumers want to buy from and do business with brands that share their values and beliefs, and they will punish those businesses they view as irresponsible. So this was purpose as much more about having a value system and a belief system that people could relate to. And just to support that, a survey by Channel 4 Television in the UK said that 57% of young people believe that brands should use their advertising to raise awareness of social or ethical issues. Now, we might come back on this particular focus on purpose and say, well, okay, is this absolutely the case? Is this absolutely true? So let's just see about that particular point. And then just to sort of go back round and sum it all up, a sort of a fourth summary about the wider benefits of purpose. And the first one is that it creates a sort of operational and media or communications consistency. If you know what your purpose is about, you can communicate that through. It gives you a platform to communicate through your organization externally and organize your business around. It's particularly motivating to staff. Many of you will be familiar with the old story about a janitor on the Apollo space mission being approached and asked what he was doing. And he said he was there putting a man on the moon. In other words, they had this very clear purpose for the Apollo system, which was communicated right through the organization, and everybody shared it and got together and helped drive the effectiveness of the project. It also enables you to inform and inspire your stakeholders, particularly communities that you might work with, or you have your operations based within. And if they understand what your aims and beliefs are, your purpose beyond, as I say, simply stocks and shares and profitability. Increasingly, having a clear purpose is set out as being important in attracting and retaining talent. And you may well be thinking about these things yourselves. People want to work for organizations that they sort of believe in, sympathize, and share the values of. And that we see that as an increasing requirement of people. They don't simply want to work for sort of companies that are just totally and utterly profit focused to the exclusion of anything else. But I should come back around and say it can help shareholder value and profitability, as we've seen in those examples. But I did say there was a counter view, and here's quite a controversial statement. Patently, the whole concept of brand purpose is moronic. I do not want Starbucks telling me about race relations and world peace. I wanted to serve me a decent cup of coffee in pleasant locations. And that was Mark Ritson, who's a sort of quite a prominent marketing professor. So there's an alternative view that is pretty straightforward and possibly quite contentious. But what's the problem then? What's the problem with brand purpose potentially? And again, here's another point of view from Creative Review, which said the central mantra that doing good is good business encourages brands to harness social issues as a way of increasing sales. It flatters them into thinking they have a higher purpose beyond profit when usually they don't. And that's sort of a bit of a leveler. It's sort of bringing organizations down a bit and so saying, hang on, what are you doing here with this purpose thing? Is it genuine? Is it authentic? Let's go on and look at that a bit more. Is it a question of definition? Mark Ritson again. It's crucial we draw a line between businesses that were founded from purpose and those that originated with a profit agenda and applied purpose to secure more of it. So I think there he's slightly rowing back from his more controversial statement, which says it's moronic and wrong, to saying you could maybe distinguish between exactly what he said here: companies that are founded from a purpose, and those that have developed a purpose and used it towards a profit agenda. Not necessarily they're saying that is completely wrong. The implication is being that businesses that are truly purpose-led are more original, more authentic than those that bolt it on, if you like. But I'd ask the question, can it ever be selfless, this notion of purpose? Can you just be a good corporate citizen? Some of you maybe remember some of the old school philanthropic type organizations. So Cadbury, the chocolate company, famously developed its own, around its factory, its own small town, village, Bourneville, setting up schools and housing and so forth for its employees, as did Unilever, who I mentioned before, and they established a whole community in Port Sunlight in the UK. More recent example, Ricoh restored 400,000 lost photos after the Japanese tsunami. They just did it. It was a contribution to society for its own sake. And the famous advertising guru Bill Bernbach, he said, a principle isn't a principle until it costs you something. So it's a counterpoint to this idea of being purpose-driven, it being good business and making profit. Yes, it might, but equally it might not. And I don't think, therefore, people are advocating that these companies are charities or simply give away all their profits. It does beg the question of, can they ever be truly selfless? Otherwise, you have simply established a company as a charity. Also, I want to go back to that point about people being critical of brands that don't have a purpose. And maybe it's not as effective. A purpose is not as effective. And certainly some of these purposes are not as effective as they're made out. So if societal good was critical to the success of a business, then theoretically an unethical brand, another brand should flounder and be found out, if you like. But there's some examples where Uber grew its share of the US millennial population. There's a lot of stories, true or not, I can't comment, about the working conditions at Apple and Amazon, particularly overseas, that hasn't appeared to affect growth. And there's also lots of questions around the business and accounting practices of businesses like Starbucks and Facebook internationally in the way they manage their affairs doesn't appear to have affected their commercial success. Might be an argument that they might be even more successful if they didn't do these. But a survey from Ipsos Mori said that only 12% of millennials pick brands for responsible behavior. So slightly different to what was being said by David Jones earlier on. And only 16% have boycotted one. So people might well talk a good game, but do they follow it through in the market? Do they actually punish the brands as Jones suggested they would? So why is this apparent contradiction between purposeful brands with difficult practices or questionable practices still being used? And I think the truth of it is that consumers don't really know much about the brands they buy. We tend to just buy on a sort of almost generally a heuristic basis, so, a repetition of things that we've always bought. People say they care about social issues, but it's not always or even that often why they buy things. People buy things that best meet their needs. So that when brands adopt social causes, they can risk becoming just a little bit a bit superficial and irrelevant. The need, in my contention, is that you need to base purpose on improving consumers' lives, not on social responsibility. That's a question we might come back to at the end. But when brands and products do reflect consumer needs, they can be very effective. So if we look at the example of Nike, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world, a very genuine, purpose-driven brand, and it seems that they've lived up to that and been successful because of it. Or Levi's, very simple. They talk about authentic self-expression. I always find it slightly amusing with Levi's that everybody wants to be an individual, so wears Levi's, so everybody ends up wearing Levi's. But that's a point for another day. Give you a case study, a brand that many of you will be familiar with, Patagonia. They had an original purpose, which was to build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. And some facts about Patagonia: they dedicate a significant percentage of their profits to good causes. They gave the tax breaks that they received in the US to environmental charities. Starbucks didn't do. They don't do Black Friday, but give the profit to charities. And they've now become even more purpose-driven. They've actually reworked that purpose at the top of the chart and moved it on to Patagonia is in business to save our home planet. That's their relatively recently developed purpose. So a pretty big, hefty pitch there by Patagonia to save our home planet. So here's a useful classification that may have come out from this discussion, and that's from a good strategic planner called Tom Roach. And he postulates that there's sort of three types of brands, if you like. Brands that are born purposeful, could maybe argue that that's Patagonia and what they've done. Then you've got the corporate converts who've sort of adopted stronger and maybe more broader sustainable purposes. And I think I'd probably put Unilever in that category. And then you've got the pseudo-purposeful brands, as he calls them, the ones that have sort of tacked on a bit of purpose, a bit of social value, and a bit of social idealism. And I'm not going to. We've maybe all got our own personal views about what they are going to be. So I'm not going to name and shame in that third category. But Tom argues that the likelihood of purpose driving a profit, he says, actually declines from 1 to 3. In other words, the more genuinely purposeful you are, the likely more profitable you will be, which is actually an interesting counterpoint, because of course we have said that being purposeful may well cost you he's arguing if you are genuine in the long term, it will be of value to you. So interesting view there. So a couple of little examples of when purpose goes wrong. Many of you might remember a Pepsi TV commercial when I think this is Kendall Jenner sort of solved a riot by handing out cans of Pepsi. Oh, here's another interesting example. Dove, a Unilever brand, who've actually had a lot of success and praise for their sort of their natural body shape campaigns, were actually criticised when they produced these packaging that came in all sort of different human style sizes. And I think that was seen as just being a little bit too jokey with a serious topic. And if I looked like one of those bottles, was I supposed to buy the packaging that looked like me, or the packaging I'd like to look like? Who knows? But it wasn't a massive success, this packaging. And here's an example. Some of you may have been familiar with this. Is a sort of a tactical example. McDonald's sort of decoupled their arches during the current coronavirus pandemic to sort of promote social distancing. They didn't do much else at the time, and I think they were criticised for this particular approach. Quite clever, but maybe just a little bit superficial. Okay, that's a review of purpose, and we'll come back on that. I just wanted to say a little bit about TFL and purpose. As Doug has hinted at, we're a pretty large organisation. We're the largest integrated transport network in Europe that normally would be moving around 27 million journeys a day around London. We're not currently doing that many journeys for obvious reasons, but we're a very broad scale organisation. Again, you can see all the pictures. If it moves in London in its transport, then we're probably responsible for it. And that's created, the integration of it creates a very powerful consumer offering linked together by our Oyster and contactless ticketing. But we ourselves have sort of practiced what I'm preaching, if you like, and spent a lot of time thinking about what our purpose should be. And we've defined it, our purpose, in the following ways: to keep London moving, working, and growing, and make life in our city better. That is our normal day-to-day purpose. But with this current pandemic, we've recast that to say getting London moving and working again safely and sustainably as quickly as possible. So that's our purpose, and then we run all that through with our sort of our brand promise, if you like, a simple promise. Every journey matters, which appears on everything that we do and runs through all our activities. So let me summarize. Purpose, the concept of purpose, can be a powerful business driver with a range of benefits, and that's giving the organization a reason to be beyond just profit or stakeholder value, but saying this is why we exist, this is what we can do. But it's not a panacea. It needs to be authentic and not just bolted on, as we've seen. I would argue that brands still need to stay rooted in customer needs. But staying true to your purpose, it can have value, but now and again it it might cost you. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to hand over to Douglas and Janaki to questions. Doug, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. That was really, really interesting. It's such a fascinating topic. Just considering what the purpose is, and I think you had some great examples there. Really, very, very interesting, and also I think it was interesting seeing some of the positives and some of the negatives that you saw in the whole thing. Really quite fascinating also seeing how it's affected your own business. And that's a sort of marketing response to your purpose, isn't it, in a way?
Yes, I mean, I think we found that having a clear purpose. I mean, this is not a conversation. It's not a discussion about the pandemic per se, but having a clear purpose helped us in all the ways that I described, both internally, the man on the moon idea of helping our people within the company understand what we're about. But I think it also helped us externally. We raising funds, working with all the different. We have a huge stakeholder base, as you might imagine, all the different communities around London, and for people understanding what we're about, and that we're not just about making money out of transport. We're not even just about moving people around. We're about making life in London better. Some of our solutions might be for people to travel less, or they might actually be to travel in different ways. So it's not always about getting the tube or getting the bus. It might be walking, it might be cycling, other more sustainable ways of transport. And so having that purpose that included making life in London better was very helpful.
Could I just ask you a couple of things, Chris, specifically? Do you think that purpose is easier to remember than, because I thought your example about the Apollo mission was great, but do you think, often when you go into an organization, you say, what's the mission?
Yes.
No one really knows it. Do you think purpose is something which is easier to understand and easier to share?
I'm not really sure. It's what I said at the beginning. I think that it's, we can get a bit hung up on the jargon. If we forgot the jargon and just said, look, do we know why we're here and what we're about? Whether that's a mission or a vision or, more a mission or a purpose. I think they probably get. So I can't remember exactly, but, Tesla, I'm not sure they have a purpose, but they have a mission to completely change the world of the world of transport and the world of, I think they don't call it a purpose, but it would be effectively a purpose. But what it does do is give a clear focus, again, both internally and externally, to what Tesla is about. Yeah.
It's well. One last thing, and I can see we've got some questions coming through from our attendees, and I'd also like to hand over to Janaki in just a moment, and she may have some things to ask you as well. I just wondered, is there a danger that purpose becomes such a generic concept that it doesn't differentiate? So if you think of some of the major themes in marketing today, often around sustainability or the Me Too movement or whatever it happens to be, do you think there's a danger that things will become very similar?
Yes, I think it's a great question, and I think you're right. In fact, if we have a little bit of time, there's a video that I will I can play, which is about the ads that ran during the current COVID crisis, and they arguably they drew on very, very similar themes, but also there is a risk, and we even saw it in some of the examples, that and I'm not being cynical here, because I think the notion is a good one of having a purpose, but you start to see the same words coming around a little bit. planet and empowering and vision. There's some quite big sort of social issues, social concepts flying around. That Starbucks purpose is pretty heavy duty, actually, if you strip it back. And that's why we saw Ritson making a little bit of fun of it there, saying, "Look, I just want a cup of coffee. I just, I'm not here to change the world. Can I just sit down and have a cup of coffee?" If we've got a couple of minutes, though, shall I just let us have a bit of light relief and look at the video clip while maybe people are thinking about some other questions. So this was I'll play this video. You can look at it yourself on YouTube, and it's self-explanatory, but it sort of slightly makes fun of the whole range of ads that came out at the beginning of the COVID crisis. I'm hoping we can get that link coming up.
When we first opened our doors.
Since 1926.
Since 1978.
For 60 years.
For 75 years.
For over 80 years. In 90 years.
Over 100 years. Nationwide has been on your side.
Restaurants have always been there for you.
Nissan has been with you through thick and thin.
We will do what we've always done.
Take care of people.
We're people.
People.
People. People.
People.
People, family.
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 Family. Family.
Family.
Family.
Family. Families are families. Families.
Even now. Especially now. Especially now.
Right now.
Now more than ever.
More than ever.
Today, more than ever.
Today, more than ever.
In times like this.
At times like these.
During these difficult times.
In these troubled times.
Challenging times.
Trying times. In these times of uncertainty.
During this time of great uncertainty.
During these uncertain times.
During these uncertain times.
In uncertain times.
In uncertain times. Uncertain times.
Unprecedented times.
Unprecedented times.
Unprecedented times.
This unprecedented moment in our history.
It's time of social distancing. While things have slowed down.
As we turn more inside.
While the doors may be closed.
While the distance between us has gotten bigger.
The more we stay apart,
We still find ways to stay close, even when we're apart.
even if we can't stand closer than 6 feet.
We can all stay connected to work, school, and most importantly, to each other.
There's still ways to touch each other.
All without leaving the comfort and safety of your home.
Without leaving the safety of your home.
From home.
Home. Your home.
At home.
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 Home. Home. Home. Home.
Home. Home.
That's the key.
Buick and GMC are here to help. Con Edison is here to help.
Here to help.
Our teams are here.
We are here.
We're here.
We're here.
Here for you.
Here for you.
We're here for you.
We're here for you.
We are here for you.
We're here for you.
We are here for you. We'll be here for you.
Bunnings is here for you.
We're still here for you.
We're with you.
We're part of your community.
So you can trust us.
You can count on us.
And we'll get through this. Together.
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 Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
We're together. Together. And together.
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 MasterCard.
Can I take the opportunity now to invite Janaki to make some comments and observations on the presentation?
Yes, I think interesting, and generally very interesting presentation on purpose as well. I think the one thing I remember during the entire period is I got tons of email from CEOs of every company possible who said they understood what we were in and all those things, and then you suddenly wondering, I don't even knew these people had my details. I think initially it made sense, but then for the longer run, it just felt like, they're doing it, that there's more of a peer pressure to do something at this stage. But yeah, I mean, do you think, I think there's one that kind of, so a question I want to ask, but also someone else has also asked. So I'll probably start off with the questions because we don't have a lot of time left. Is one of them has asked, how do you adapt the concept of purpose given constant uncertainty from the COVID pandemic? And to kind of add on to that, my question is more like, I think everyone's trying to do something different at this point as a response to the pandemic. But then, do they have to do like this ad and all the ads that you showed me? Like, in your experience, do companies have to do something like this? Or can they just keep their head down and focus on their purpose and keep going?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think a few things there. I think I can see why people did that, because I think they probably felt a little bit powerless and wanted to be seen to be out there and doing something and communicating with their customers, but probably weren't quite sure what to say. So I think where people did real practical things, like turned over their production lines to making ventilators, or there was a brewing company in this country that started making hand sanitizer, or, I think where people, putting aside what their purpose might be, but actually said, turn themselves practically to dealing with the issue. I think that's important. So I think you need to be practical and bring it back. I think again, there's just no point in just bolting on, your heritage or your people, or we're always there for you, or what have you. Genuinely really do something. Cut your prices, change your customer service. Do something that is demonstrable rather than just bolt on a piece of communication. Help people in ways that are relevant. Obviously, if you've got a good core purpose already, you may not need to. In our own particular case, we talked about getting things back moving sustainably but safely, because there's a whole concern about the safety of public transport. So I don't think there's a single answer, but you need to ground it in some sort of reality, I think.
Yeah. That's a good one. I think that kind of follows to the other question that G. Chen has asked. How do I know if my purpose is the right one?
Well, I guess there's a couple of ways of looking at that, because you might just it depends on what is right. How are you judging right? When I don't know Patagonia particularly well, I use it as a case study, but they set themselves up and said, right, we're going to be about this. They could have failed. Would that mean that their purpose was the wrong one? I don't know. It just might mean that, their business model or whatever. I mean, I think there's a whole process around vision, values, mission, purpose. And it's about the authenticity. And if it's about what you're trying to achieve, with your business or with your service, that's when it comes from. It may not necessarily be right. I know my purpose is right when I've made, more money than than the other company. It's about whether you feel you're living that purpose and delivering it. I think so. I mean, the glib answer is to say you'll know rightness when you see it, because it'll be what feels right to the organization.
But then again, coming to another question we have, which I think kind of follows on to what you've said as well, is that how do you measure how do you know accurately that you've achieved the purpose, and how do you communicate to your customers that this is the purpose and we've achieved it? So there's one thing is, yes, you'll know when that happens, but then the other thing about I think to a lot of things, marketing is also about measuring the success or seeing if we are there. So how do you think you can translate purpose into something that's measurable?
Yeah, I think I think that's probably a more straightforward one. You would look at your purpose. So in our case, we have keep London working and growing, make life in our city better, and we have every journey matters. So what we have done is we've established a series of measures, which are sort of, and you're all probably all much better at market research than I am. You're sort of intermediate variables, if you like, and there may be things like, in our case, we look at trust, and are we trusted? We look at transparency, and are we open in our dealings? So you'll have a series of individual metrics. Might be value for money. We have another measure called progress and innovation. Are we progressing and developing for our customers? It might be something like momentum. So you would look at the purpose that you developed, and then you'd look at the variables which you felt were most appropriate to measure that, as I say, like trust, and then measure those. And then I think you communicate them. Again, it's a classic marketing. It's almost the 4 Ps, if you like, of your product, place, promotion, and so forth. Positioning is you then live the purpose, not just advertising it, but also saying my product, in Patagonia's case, will reflect the purpose. My marketing, my promotion will reflect it, but my staff will as well. The whole customer experience. There's no point in just doing an advert and then letting everything else go hang.
Yeah, so it's kind of having your mission statement, but then also the values that will tell you, how do you get to your mission statement, and then between your mission statement and the values to be able to say, okay, these are the metrics, how we are going to measure ourselves. It could mean, some of them would obviously be more, is a business doing well, like more financial stuff, but the others, like you say, about transparency or about community and maybe sustainability and all those things.
Absolutely. And okay. I think also probably the more, if you like, differentiated and distinctive the purpose, probably the easier it is to measure. Because otherwise the danger is, it's back to Doug's early question about are these things end up a bit samey, that you have a purpose and then you just end up measuring the same old stuff, whether it's sort of brand awareness or this or that, or elements of the brand which don't really tell you anything.
Yeah. That is very interesting, and I think that there's a very interesting question on bigger companies versus like smaller companies. So there's a question here. It's quite long, so I'm just going to read it out for you. Where Patricia asks, how can if purpose can cost you, how can companies remain competitive against like the bigger players who are able to cut costs but not have a genuine purpose? And is there any data on the evolution of companies that begin with a strong purpose and commitment, and then over time it diminishes due to market pressures?
It's a great question, and I think there is that little bit of that danger that in presentations like this we bring out the usual examples, and we'll talk about a Patagonia or a Body Shop or examples of very authentic, very purpose-driven brands that are generally quite small. And then the challenges as you get bigger, your stakeholder pressures, the commercial pressures, makes it harder and harder to face up to those challenges. And I was reading about Johnson and Johnson, who I don't know, they're sort of home care and personal care giant, and who'd been very purpose driven, and then had got themselves really, had withdrawn products that were, had problems with and stuff like that, and then got themselves really sort of bogged down in litigation about what was in some of their products, because it just the issue was so enormous for them. It was going to be hard to deal with. But then, I guess that's what this is about. I think if you're not true to that, but as we see in the research, is a bit mixed. You probably can get away with some pretty difficult and unpleasant practices and still do commercially quite well. Do you ever get found out? I don't know, but that's something that businesses have got to think about. I would say that consumers, whilst the evidence is mixed about whether people truly focus on social values, that there is genuinely, I think, a mood more towards favouring businesses that have some element of sustainability, social purpose, providing they then deliver against it in some meaningful ways, and to say, don't just bolt it on.
Yeah.
Chris, can I jump in? You said you'd answer questions on pretty much anything. You've got a question here. It says, how has coronavirus affected TFL's revenue through advertising? Do firms still want to advertise on TFL as much, considering the reduced footfall? Is that information to talk about or not?
I'm happy to talk about it. It's in the public domain to an extent. So yes, the TFL advertising estate is the biggest in the world. It's the biggest outdoor poster estate anywhere, and it raises several £100 million a year, which goes back into transport. In the early days of the pandemic, when the footfall on our system, it dropped to 5%. We had 5% of our normal volumes, and that had a very dramatic impact on our advertising revenues. It's slowly coming back. It's coming back more on our, what we might call our roadside estate, bus shelters. Because road traffic is actually built up quite quickly. It's coming back more slowly on the tubes and on the rail side. It is coming back, and what we're seeing is almost what we might call a new normal. It's not that no one is traveling. Actually, quite a lot of people are traveling. We have several million unique users, because we can track this with the Oyster cards, every day. And as an advertiser, you're going to say, look, that might not be the biggest audience that compared to what it used to be, but it's still an audience, and it's still a big audience, and it's an audience I want to reach, and it's still quite an important audience for me. So yes, it had a big impact. B, it's still having a big impact. But as we're now starting to educate the market and to understand that if there are certain people I want to reach, this is still a strong way to reach them.
Janaki, do you want to take one more of the questions?
Yeah. There's another question here that talks about, should the purpose be the driving factor of a business or more of a supporting element for smaller firms?
I think we touched on that in that earlier question. I think often it's easier for smaller firms, and you see a lot of these startups, whether there might be a little restaurant or a coffee shop, or they're making a new style of bike or something like that. You can see often smaller organizations start with the sort of the focus of one or two founders who want to build a business. But I think it's equally important for large businesses. I mean, we find it particularly important because we employ so many people and have so many stakeholders. Having a clear, easily communicatable purpose is very, very helpful to us. A small company, they can sort of go around quite quickly and tell everybody. For us to have a very clear purpose that also it's that old, everybody can be on message within the organization and externally. So I think it's equally valuable to large businesses. It's probably harder to do in a bigger business, and actually probably harder to stay faithful to a purpose in a large business, which may well get pulled about in ways that small businesses don't.
Chris, I can see we've only got a couple of minutes to go. Do you have any concluding points that you'd like to raise? I think we've got a few more questions, but I don't think we've got time to answer them, unfortunately.
Well, no, if you want to squeeze in another couple of questions rather than hear me chatter on, Doug, by all means.
Right, I'll have a look at this. This is an interesting one. Do you think companies, this is from Nida to the Eunice, it says, I think, do you think companies, even without a purpose, can succeed? Apple, and the example they give is Apple.
Well, I think Apple has got I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but I think Apple has got a very clear purpose. Yeah. I think something about making device. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I have seen it. I mean, Apple may be a good example of being very single-minded about its design and about its products, and then some questions about how it operates in the wider world in terms of where it gets its products from and stuff like that. So clearly, you can not have a purpose and succeed, but even when you don't have a purpose, you sort of have a purpose because you must be doing something.
Yeah.
That's true. And you, sorry, Janika.
Yeah, I think it's true what you said, because if you compare like a company's purpose like to an individual's values and purpose and how they go about their life, what you say is, it is very true that everybody has a purpose, everybody has a set of values that they use to get them to where they want to be. But obviously, until someone really asks you, what's your purpose or what's a value from an individual perspective, we all have it, we just don't talk about it. But I think if you turn it around for a company, it's important to communicate it, like you say, to the stakeholders, to the people who work for the company, to the suppliers, partners, and the customers. So I think that's where it really becomes important to highlight the purpose.
Well, I think the clock has defeated us. Can I thank all our attendees and for their questions? But mainly, of course, can I thank, and of course, sorry, Janaki, can I thank you for your participation? It's been a pleasure to have you with us. And Chris, it's great. Very, very interesting. Love the material. Really very thought-provoking. Who'd have thought that thinking about the purpose as such individually could be, such a deep issue to consider. And I love that YouTube set of commercials that you showed us. It's really excellent. So thank you on behalf of the Business School and everybody organising this. And I hope the attendees have enjoyed the session. Thank you, everybody.